Alright guys, back again eventually with the second video in this revisiting SAFC Managers series. Apologies that I just haven't got around to doing it in the last few days, but nevertheless, hopefully, you'll still enjoy it nonetheless. So obviously the last video, we covered Steve Bruce, and again, thank you to Wearside Life for the thumbnails. His design, absolutely brilliant. Go and check out his channel, covering the fall from Sunderland to an extent, but it's very well put together videos called Fall from Grace. I'm sure it'll be worth your time. But anyway, on this video, we're going to talk about Martin O'Neill, who obviously is, of course, Steve Bruce's successor. In December 2011, Martin O'Neill was appointed by Ellis Short as the successor to Steve Bruce. He sat in the stands for a 2-1 defeat against Wolverhampton Wanderers. Kieran Richardson put us in front, and then a future Sunderland striker, Stephen Fletcher, scored twice for Wolves to earn them a victory. O'Neill's first game came at home against Blackburn Rovers, who were struggling just as much as we were at the time under Steve Keane. We went behind in the game at the Stadium of Light before two late goals from James Vaughan and an injury time free kick from Seb Larsson got us a 2-1 win, and O'Neill's start came off to a flyer. For the rest of that season, we did fairly well actually. We ended up getting to the FA Cup quarter-finals where we beat Peterborough 2-0, beat Middlesbrough 2-1 at the Riverside in a replay after drawing 1-1 at the Stadium of Light. We then beat Arsenal 2-0, which was probably the best result in the competition, to be honest, given that Arsenal had actually come from behind to beat us at the Stadium of Light a week earlier in the Premier League. We beat them at the Stadium of Light 2-0 in the FA Cup to get to the quarter-finals. During that run as well, we'd ended up getting ourselves to 8th in the Premier League before we faced Everton in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. Phil Bardsley scored a rocket, I remember this. Watched it in the pub, watched it at the Stadium of Light in the part of a beanbag sort of offer. And God, that was 8 years ago. God, time flies by. 8 years ago, Tim Cahill earned a replay for Everton. And then this is kind of where the end started for O'Neill for me. We lost 2-0, quite pathetically lost 2-0 at home to Everton in the FA Cup replay. Nikita Jelavic and a David Vaughan goal sealed the fate in the FA Cup. And then from there in the league, we kind of drifted and finished 13th, which, wasn't the worst season in the world. I was disappointed not to finish in the top 10, mind. But then this is kind of where O'Neill should really be judged. O'Neill then signed, obviously, Adam Johnson. We won't go into what happened there. Stephen Fletcher, Among Carlos Queer. There's a host of other players that he obviously signed. And the following season, we opened with a creditable 0-0 draw at Arsenal. We actually started our first 5 or 6 games unbeaten, I think. I think it was our first 5 games unbeaten, but we drew our first 4. So at least we were harder to beat. But then obviously we lost 3-0 to Man City. Then I think we drew 1-1 with 10-man Newcastle. And bearing in mind these were down to 10 men. Sorry, just this. These were down to 10 men for the good part of an hour in the game, and we still couldn't manage to beat them. So, that really wasn't good enough. And then from there on, we just kind of looked lethargic and flat. Actually, funnily enough, this shirt, Invest in Africa shirt, is one that was obviously from the 12-13 season, the away kit. Things did start to look up for O'Neill a little bit after Christmas of 2012, where I think we won 4 games in 7, and we didn't lose that many games, actually. We signed Danny Graham in the January window, where we signed him for £5 million, and I think he went on to score like 1 Premier League goal in his whole 2 and a bit years at Sunderland, although he was out on loan in the intervening years. But then things started to drift off quite a bit, and eventually, after a 1-0 defeat to Manchester United, where we hadn't won for something like 6 or 7 games, I think, O'Neill did get the bullet, which obviously Paolo Di Canio was then his successor and replacement. So to kind of wrap it up with my thoughts on O'Neill, whereas I said in the last video that I felt Steve Bruce in 2011-12, I think in that, before Bruce left, I did think Sunderland were actually playing some half-decent football. We actually weren't playing too bad. We were creating a lot of chances, we just weren't taking them. The problem I had with O'Neill was that we weren't creating any chances, or we were barely creating chances, and he was trying to make us hard to beat, yet still conceded sloppy goals. One of the decisions that he made, and feel free to disagree with me on this, that I really didn't think was a good decision on O'Neill's part, was selling Michael Turner, who I thought was okay, solid enough at the back, and when he replaces him with a 32-year-old or 31-year-old Carlos Queer, who's barely got anything about him as a footballer. Obviously, I'm sure he's an absolutely lovely bloke, but I just didn't rate Carlos Queer at all, and I didn't rate O'Neill for that matter. I think O'Neill gets a lot of a free ride from Sunderland fans, and I think, no, this was where the underachievement era started, where I think O'Neill was... When I was watching Sunderland over O'Neill, when I was watching O'Neill at Sunderland under Martin O'Neill, I just didn't see the manager that other people saw. Now, bearing in mind, I only can judge on what I saw him at Sunderland, and obviously you've got him before coming to Sunderland, where he did fairly well with like Leicester, Aston Villa, and all that. I just didn't see it. I just think with O'Neill, we were sleepwalking towards relegation, and I think had we not sacked him, I think that we would have gone down. And people can say, oh, well, John Watson, or was it John Watson, I think it was, is number 2. Yeah, but O'Neill still should have done better with more than what he had. I've seen a few people say, oh, but they think O'Neill could have really done well. Well, I disagree. I think O'Neill played some of the worst football that I've seen at Sunderland. And again, I just think that Martin O'Neill gets a free ride. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm in a minority opinion on that, but I didn't like O'Neill's tactics. I didn't like the style of football that he had, and eventually I think it was the right decision to get rid of him. What I will say is that his wife was reportedly, again, this is if it's true to be honest, was seriously ill at the time he was at Sunderland. Right, okay, in which case he shouldn't be Sunderland manager. And I'm not just talking for Sunderland's sake, because of course his mind's not going to be fully on the job. It couldn't be when you've got your wife at home who's seriously ill. Again, allegedly, O'Neill shouldn't have been at Sunderland. More for his sake than for ours. But anyway, look, I will appreciate that he's a Sunderland fan. I just think he was a really huge disappointment, to be honest. Anyway, love you and leave you there, guys. And the next instalment will be Paolo Di Canio. And boy, this is where things start to get interesting. Again, stay safe, take care, and love you to bits.